Okay, welcome to my channel. My name is Attorney Atty Graves. Welcome. If it's the first time that you are joining me, I'm so honored to have you. So let me introduce myself. I am an estate planning and family law attorney practicing in Maryland and Washington, D.C. area. How proud Harvard alumni graduate class of 2005. So I have been doing this for a little while. Established my firm back in 2012. So I am knee deep in a lot of domestic disputes. And this video to me, I wanted to put it out there. So, first, this is going to talk about the misuse of protective orders. There's obviously an active need and a need for protective orders dealing with domestic violence. If you feel threatened, you feel harmed, these protective orders are designed to protect those who are in, some really toxic relationships and they need the protection. What we're talking about here today is not those cases, not the valid use, but the misuse. What's happening, and I want you guys to be really aware of this, is that I'm finding that protective orders sometimes are used to deal with the winding down of marriages. And this is what I have noticed in my practice, and I want to put it out there. And a lot of times it affects the breadwinners, the males, the men in my that I represent in protective orders. It could be anybody who is a respondent, anybody who this is filed against. But here's the general profile. So I'm going to give you the general profile. So recently in Maryland, they changed the law whereby you could get a divorce if you guys are living under the same roof. What we have found is that sometimes marriages are winding down. This is the profile of the situation that I want you to watch out for, because if a protective order is entered against you, it has a devastating and immediate impact to you and your finances and your daily life and where you're living. It has financial impacts. It can interfere with your ability to visit with your children, right? So here's what I'm finding. People are in relationships and the relationship is winding down. People are living under the same roof. They're sleeping in different bedrooms, right? Underlying it, there could be the fact that someone is the breadwinner and someone is financially dependent on that person, right? So let's put it from the perspective of the people using, in my opinion, sometimes the protective order mechanism to wind down the marriage. So this is the perspective that I'm seeing. The relationship is winding down. The person is financially dependent on this other person. Parties aren't getting along. Marriage counseling isn't working. So they kind of want the person out of the relationship, but need the financial resources, right? Now, here is where we have prevailed and instances where we have not. We have not prevailed where there's been a history of domestic violence, meaning, and I'm going to use that term like it's a toxic relationship. It could be that there's fighting in the household. Might not always be that someone is, battering somebody else, but the relationship is toxic to the point whereby it rises to the level that there's physical altercations. The police are called. You know what's going on in the privacy of your home. Those situations are hotbeds for protective orders. The court looks at it as if, listen, and it could be a couple years. It could be, 2 years ago, we was both drinking. We both stopped drinking and we're no longer going to get into these physical altercations. And now you realize, well, while it's not physical, it's not ideal. And maybe the ship has sailed and this relationship is over. That situation, if someone can come into court and say that there's a history of any type of altercation and they can bring pictures or anything like that, you have to really watch out for protective orders. In those instances, what you can find yourself is being put out the house, like I said earlier, and still having to provide emergency financial maintenance. The court will enter an order whereby you can visit with your kids, but all of a sudden overnight, you're displaced. You're living in a hotel, you're sleeping on somebody's couch, and the person can also ask the court to have you pay the overhead and expenses of the marital residence or the residence shared between you and this other person. I want you to watch out for that. You're going to have to make a decision as to whether it's a healthy environment for you to stay in, to coexist in with another person. Some of the things that I've also noticed that people that are misusing, sometimes, in my opinion, the domestic statute, sometimes there's substance abuse. Maybe people are drug users, alcohol users. You're going to have to really look at the temperature of this relationship and the possibility of it bubbling over to involve the police. If police have been called in the past, they will probably be called in the future. If you're not going to marital counseling and working on it, you're going to have to make a big boy and girl decision as to whether it's time to really wind down the marriage and make concrete steps instead of being in this hostile environment that can blow up and really impact you. Having a judgment entered against you really has negative impacts. It stays in your criminal history. It stays on your public record for judgments. Any judgments entered against you is a part of your credit history as well. It can interfere with security clearances. And watch out for being in scenarios that people know that you're vulnerable. If you have a high security clearance and someone has, knows that and knows that you're vulnerable to that, we've had that happen. Now, the instances where we have prevailed have been where my client has been above, reproach, upstanding, the other party really couldn't impugn their character, right? And this petition just didn't make sense. It really needs to be assessed. So I will tell you that if you have been served with a protective order, you definitely want to talk to an attorney, definitely get some legal counsel as to whether you should contest this, whether you should consent, right? So those are some options. And people ask me often, well, what does consenting mean? Am I admitting to doing what the person said? Well, it's a 50-50. It's preponderance of the evidence. The court has to be convinced that this person is fearful of you. I have seen some, Shakespearean, acts in court. And the court just really does not have much tolerance for people coexisting where it could, result in violence. It has happened where the court, thought, well, I don't know. I don't, know if I believe the person, and they have denied the petition and violence has occurred and ended up in death. So they're really, erring on the side of caution, right? So someone's going to come in and fabricate stories. So looking at the character of your spouse, their ability to, embellish the truth, fabricate the truth, lie. You have to, because people think magically when you come to court, there is some truth serum that is injected into somebody before the court. No, the court has to sit on the bench, not knowing either one of you, and make a decision as to whether they believe this person is fearful of you. That fear is personal within them, right? And if you've had a history of domestic violence, I think the court can easily be convinced that while this person slapped me before, or we got into a physical altercation before, they say they're rehabilitated, but I'm not comfortable how they got loud. And these things and these instances are not where there was an altercation that gave rise to the recent petition. It is an argument, okay? It's like, I didn't like how he raised his voice. He knocked on the door. He was banging on the door, telling me, to open up the door so he could get the car keys, okay? That's literally a petition that went before the court. And the court said, well, if she's afraid of you and felt that, you banging on the door put her in imminent fear of bodily harm or injury, they're going to grant it. And then, so say they grant it, now what? Now, they can also, if they're not working and they're financially dependent upon you, you can end up having to pay for a house that you're no longer staying in. So all I'm saying is that not for those who are in instances that this statute was designed to protect, by all means. But if you're in a toxic relationship that has some fire to it, that you guys are really going at it behind closed doors, be wary. You may want to really consider, when is it time for you to move on, okay? Because if you don't wind it down in an orderly manner, it could have a real destabilizing impacts on you. So I just want you to be mindful of that. I want you to be aware of it. I want you to be assessing the character of your spouse, looking at this, seeing if it's getting better, if you're still getting the, the sense that you're in a cold war that sparks up. Because I'm gonna tell you honestly, as thinking that you could coexist living under the same roof. I think sometimes one partner may be better at that than others. They may be able to say, listen, I ain't got to talk to you. I could just go about my business and do my work, remotely work from home. I'm living downstairs, you living upstairs. You don't bother me. I don't bother you. We're good. Sometimes the other, partner isn't really into that. And the fact that you guys are living in this toxic relationship could be agitating to them, and they're wanting a way to get out, but still need financial resources from you. So, one of the things you can do is really sit down and say, okay, if we're going to end this relationship and you need some financial resources, let's figure out how to make sure everyone's okay. But that requires emotional maturity. So that's why that goes to figuring out who your spouse is and looking at their history. So these are things I just want you to watch out for because the impacts are heartbreaking and financially devastating. And usually the divorce is to follow. So I'm thinking, it's kind of better to separate at some point and figure out what you're going to do so that you're safe from protective orders and safe from, and so, you've got to really defend yourself and you're entitled to it. But again, I'm not promoting domestic violence or domestic disputes. If it's getting toxic, really consider whether it's safe for you guys to coexist under the same roof. So if you have this QR code, I think I've never really explained it, but if you scan the QR code, you'll have my digital contact information right in your phone. You can reach me at the information provided below. And then we're happy to help you as needed. Likewise, if you feel threatened, if you're in a situation where someone is financially abusing you, emotionally, verbally, physically abusing you, and you need, relief from the court, that vehicle is available to you as well. And we're happy to help and support you. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take just a little pause here because there was a second segment that I wanted to go over and it rolls into alimony. And I figured, I might as well be efficient because I'm busy. Don't have time all day to jump on lives because I'm in court dealing with, people's lives. So I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about alimony and the things that you need to know and what that looks like in Maryland and what you need to be aware of if you need alimony or someone is seeking alimony from you. But I think I'm going to focus a little bit more on what it looks like if someone's seeking alimony from you and what a viable claim looks like. Okay, so guys, just hold on one second. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. All right, so let's talk about the second part in my series called The Business of Marriage. These are dealing with the pecuniary gains, the financial entitlements that come along with being married. Now, we married for love, but when it becomes a legally binding marriage, there's economics involved, okay? Last time in this series, the first part I discussed was prenuptial agreements, which deal with marital property distributions, alimony. It can deal with how assets are distributed upon death, how money is distributed if there's a separation, any financial support that may or may not be provided. So let's just talk about alimony in the modern day amongst working class people. That's namely who I represent. And you hear a lot on television about celebrities paying alimony, large amounts of child support. And mainly it starts with the idea of someone being financially dependent upon you. So when you get married under the law, you are considered to be one economic unit under the law. Okay, let me let that sink in for a second. So what that means is, in plainer English, is that when you get married, say I get married to, Mr. Whoever, And what happens, that means I become one economic unit. We become one economic unit, being that when he goes off to make a dollar, 50 cent belongs to me. When I go off to make a dollar, 50 cent belongs to him. He does not have to show up and go to work with me, nor do I. So what happens is when you have a spouse, now there's no impact if I'm making 100,000 and he's making 100,000. He's making 200,000, I'm making 200,000. So it's like I have 100% of my money, right? But if he's making 200,000 and I'm making zero, right? That means under the law, $100,000 of that money belongs to me, depending on if it has not been used, in the course of life. Whatever is remaining, I'm entitled to 50% of that. So, some of the things that you want to consider is that reality. When you're taking on a spouse, you are pledging your love, and you're also pledging your financial resources to help support this person should they not be able to support themselves. That is a part of marriage, okay? When it comes to alimony, one of the things you have to know is if you have a spouse, and some of the issues I've run into over the years is where people have a spouse that stopped working and it's not agreed upon. That is the toughest situation to be in. You guys came into the marriage, everybody's working, and someone just said, quit it, forget it. I'm not going back to work. I don't want to do it. Now, one of the factors, there's 11 of them that the court's going to consider, but you have to look at this. How much time is passing? How much dependency has developed upon you financially to take care of the overhead of the house, right? So they're going to look at how educated is this person, right? They're going to look at how long you guys have been married, whether there are any physical or mental barriers that stop this person from being gainfully employed. Like say maybe they're disabled and they're on disability. Definitely the court would consider that. So they're going to look at how did you guys manage the relationship financially? They're going to look at what led to the demise of the marriage, right? And these are the factors they're going to consider. They're also going to consider whether in this divorce and or separation, there are other assets that this person can receive or will receive to help them transition. The court is interested in a smooth transition from being married to unmarried, and that a person that's financially dependent on another is not left destitute because the marriage is over. So you can see why the marriage ends does matter. It's a light factor though. The court kind of considers like, look, sometimes it's just an expiration date on relationships and they blow up for a lot of reasons, unless it's egregious, like we're dealing with domestic violence, like I just talked about a few minutes ago in my prior video. If we're dealing with domestic violence or some vicious and abusive conduct, those things matter and they want to hear about them. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So when you're in a situation and you find that your spouse is not working and it's not and it's financially draining the relationship, which sometimes leads to one of the biggest factors as to why a divorce ensues, you have to watch out. I'm just going to tell you, it's really divorce. To defend against alimony, it really does not promote marriage. Obviously, this statute is considering that that ship has sailed. So one of the biggest things that I'll tell you that you need to watch out for is how long the situation persists if you have a spouse that could work, that chooses not to work, right? You have to get on it. You're going to have to get to marriage counseling. You're going to have to come to Jesus and figure out what's going to happen one way or the other. Because if you allow this to happen for a long time, the court's going to say, well, this person, what if, you let it go for 15 years and now this person, is reaching retirement age. They're not going to say, go out there and go get a job and beat them streets. They're going to say, no, this person has become reliant on you. And sometimes they can say, well, you're stuck with this financial responsibility until they die or get remarried. That does happen. Typically, those situations involve a marriage that's about 25, 28, 30-year marriages, and the spouse was a stay-at-home mom, not very educated, raised the kids, contributed to the marriage, right? May or may not have a physical reason or mental reason, a barrier to working. At that stage, it's just become the lifestyle. It's become what has been allowed. So if this is happening, and it's well-bodied people, and you feel like, okay, you know, you have to watch out for the alimony trap. Okay. So that's one thing I want you to work, look out for. Work on your marriage. I'm not suggesting that people just cut and run, but I am suggesting that you work on reconciling and healing whatever's going on, or not. Make a decision. But being in limbo and letting time pass does not help. Okay, so this is tough stuff, not easy conversations. Marriage is sacred, it is a big deal, and no one's taking it lightly. But I'm going to tell you, there's some red flags to watch out for. And one of them is if you're in a marriage and your spouse just stopped working and that wasn't the agreement, you are probably going to be dealing with an alimony claim. So watch out for that. Okay. So that is what I have to share with you today, about alimony. On the other side, I'll do a separate video. I'm sure I have one already about if you need it, but you've heard it from, the side of someone who may not need it or want it, or you don't want to pay it. But on the other hand, I'll do a separate video. It's just a different lens. But the idea of marriage and alimony rests on the promise that when you took those vows, that you are going to financially support this person if needed. Okay. So if you don't want to do that, if you want to augment that and you don't want that to be 50 cents on every dollar, that's what prenuptial agreements are designed to do. To say, if something happens, babe, and this doesn't work out, I'm certainly hoping that it does. But if it doesn't work out, let's sit down and figure out what you might need. Maybe you say, I will pay 50% of your rent for 18 months and pay, security deposit, right? And give you $5,000. At least there's a plan. Okay. There's a plan that hopefully you'll never need to execute. But I like the idea of coming up with a plan where hearts are warm, where people are in love at the beginning stages, where everything is good. I love you. I love you so. Do it then. If anything happens, I never want us to argue. I never want us to feel bad. I never want that. Do it then. Come up with the agreement at that point, before things get bitter, before things get ugly, and now you want someone obliterated off the planet and hope they, eat crap and die. I don't want to deal with it then. Okay. So while hearts are warm, consider life, consider changes, and know that if this isn't going to work, how to get out of it. I think it frees you to voluntarily be in your marriage and hold tight to it, to know in the reality, no one has to be here. Marriage doesn't have to be a trap. There's always a price to pay to get out of it, but everybody's there voluntarily. Okay. So hopefully this was helpful to you. I will share these videos. You can find them on my website. You can find them on my YouTube channel. Feel free to like and share and subscribe. And I will continue to share pearls of wisdom as they come up in my practice. So thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you soon. Bye.